getting sued and facing thousands of dollars in fines. So let me give you some information here. As you know, Carolyn and I try our best to live off-grid as much as possible. We have solar panels that powers our freezer, a tablet, a couple phones, charges some batteries like my camera. And then we have the well. And that pretty much makes us off-grid. Now, Carolyn does a lot of her cooking with a homemade grill that she and I put together. She's got her whole assembly here. She uses this a lot. Well, she uses this probably more than anything, this over here. She uses this occasionally. She used to use it a lot, but I don't know. Once she got this built or taken apart, and then we use all that firewood. I don't want to say that we're off-grid when it comes to cooking, because we do use propane quite frequently, but if SHTF were ever to happen, she's got this mastered so well that she could easily cook all her food with this. Now, like today, it would be a little bit problematic because it's so windy, and she's fearful that, you know, spark would ignite the woods. And then we heat with a firewood. I've showed you our wood stove many times, and we have enough firewood to last us 15 years. And I know people are getting tired of me saying that, but we do. It's kind of like my retirement plan. I'm really proud of my firewood. Most of it is dry now. I don't have to worry about testing every piece, although I do, to make sure that it's under 20%. There are conveniences in life when it comes to living off-grid, and so we take shortcuts occasionally. So I have 10 20-pound propane tanks like this. And the reason we decided to do this is, one, like I said, it's pretty convenient, and two, we get it really cheap. We go to a place and they give us a military discount, so they give it to us at cost. When I run my generator, I'm going to explain the generator here in a minute, it costs the same to run the generator off propane, because I have a dual fuel, as it does gasoline. About the same price. Now, sometimes gasoline will jump up there a little bit and propane's cheaper, and then vice versa, but most of the time it's about the same price. Well, I like running the propane generator up here with the well. Like I said, this is dual fuel, can use gasoline or propane. You can see I think the propane tank's hooked up to the generator right now. I really like this thing. Now, the only reason I'm really using this, well, I guess there's two reasons. One, I don't have to put gasoline in the generator. The generator requires that you drain the gas out of it if it's going to sit for a while. And this sits sometimes for a week, or, well, not much longer than a week, but you're not supposed to leave it in there more than 30 days. So I just feel better using propane because it doesn't tear up the carburetor. Somebody suggested that I turn off the gasoline and let the generator run out in the carburetor. Well, that's fine too. I understand that, but there's two things with that. One, I would actually have to put a shut-off valve in there because it doesn't have one, where the carburetor would stop taking fuel from the gas tank. Right now, when you shut it off, it just shuts off, but that doesn't drain the gas. The second reason is every time you have to drain out the carburetor, you're wasting gas. You're using gas that you're not needing. So I wouldn't want to just waste, and you know, what is that? Quarter cup? Over time, that adds up, especially as much as we use it. The other reason we use this one up here is the old generator, it used to be able to run the well, but it just can't do it anymore. It's just gotten too old. And it's not the motor that's the problem. People tell me to rebuild the motor. It's not the motor, it's the inverter. So that's the thing that makes electricity. The inverter is weakened over time. The inverter has weakened over time, and it just can't produce enough amps. This one's a little bigger, it's 2,500 watts. That one down there is 2,000 watts. I bet I don't change the propane tank on that generator, gosh, every 2 or 3 months. I just don't use it that often. That's why I leave it on the propane. Another thing we use with the propane is Carolyn's cook stove here. The cook stove, like I said, she uses it, let's just call it half the time. The other half she uses the wood. This does use a little bit more propane than I would have expected. But I make coffee on it too. I should say that. It's the coffee that probably uses all the propane. We make about 2 pots a day. I don't know, sometimes it can take up to 40 minutes. Like a windy day like this, it took 40 minutes a day to make a pot of coffee. It just, that wind's blowing the heat around, it just doesn't do as well. When it's not too bad, wind's pretty stable, 15 to 20 minutes and it's got a pot of coffee. So I think that's the biggest problem with the stove, is it being outside. Now somebody's going to take it inside, close in the porch. This is what she wants, and we're going to leave it like this. But like I said, If I didn't have the coffee, we probably wouldn't have any issues. Down here I have another little propane stove, and it's just my personality. I like having two stoves, one for her, and then we have this stove to pressure can our food. And I think that's the reason I am so obsessed about doing it this way. Is it takes all day to pressure can. I get up 4 o'clock in the morning and I start cooking chicken. By 9 o'clock the pressure canners are going. By 3 o'clock everything's starting to get wrapped up. Well, then that stove over there that Carolyn uses, if I just use that one for pressure canning, it would be unusable to cook anything on, coffee or anything, all day. So I just don't like putting her through that inconvenience. So we use this stove and I hook up the tank to it. Like I said, we have 10 tanks. Now, the propane company is about 30 miles away, but fortunately, it's next to the grocery store. So when we go to the grocery store, I just take the tanks with me. I haven't filled tanks in, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 months. It's been a while. Last winter, well, I guess it was the end of last winter and the beginning of last spring, we used the propane quite a bit. We were using the buddy heater because the transition from the colder temperatures to the warmer temperatures, we were using a buddy heater. This year, I'm not gonna do that. I'll just use wood. And the reason we did it last year was because we still had quite a bit of wet wood, and I didn't want to run wet wood at cooler temperatures in the wood stove. We'd have just had so much creosote built up in the chimney, it would have been ridiculous. This year, it won't be so bad. Even if I run it cooler, the wood's dry, so we'll just get that dusting. I've showed you that dusting on the window, it wipes right off. That's all we'll get, but we won't get that sappy creosote this year. So we'll use the wood stove. We won't use propane. Now we also have the water heater. We use this more frequently than anything else when it comes to propane. This is our on-demand water heater. I've showed this before. When you turn on the water, you hear that little clicking and the flame kicks on and it instantly heats the water. I change the propane tank on it probably every 2 months, and we use that quite a bit. We use about 50 gallons every 3 or 4 days of water. So, you know, maybe not as much as you use at a house, but we use it quite a bit. It's very efficient. I like it a lot. You're not heating water that you're not using. Whereas with a regular water heater that you have in your house, it'll kick on even if you're not using it. If you're at work, the water temperature cools off, it has to heat it back up. That only heats water you're using. I've talked about the buddy heater. We have that up in the attic. I didn't want to drag it down for this video, but it's a buddy heater. It's a little camping heater. Like I said, we used that last year. We haven't used it at all this year. We figured out to use the wood stove a little bit more appropriately. Like this morning, it was 68 degrees in the house, and I knew it was going to get up in the 60s today. So I waited until she got up. That way if she got hot, she could go outside, or she could say, hey, I'm hot, open the window or whatever. So I waited until she got up, and then I started the wood stove, but I didn't put much wood in it. Like I said, we can burn it a little bit cooler now. And it only got up to 84 degrees, which I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it's really hot, but it's not that bad. So the buddy heater, but it uses a lot of propane, and I can't even remember how much it uses, but I would say if we were using, just to heat it up in the mornings and the evenings, I think we were using a tank every week or so. It was quite a bit. Many times people will suggest to me that I need to get one of those 500-gallon tanks that you see out in people's backyard. You can't do that. There's several things you have to do before you can do that. First of all, your house has to be to code. Well, this can't even be to code. It's not big enough. They don't even permit a house like this. It's not big enough. And we did that deliberately because we didn't want to permit it. The other day, I made a video and I said that we're going to put a camper down there, and I said we can hook up one of these propane tanks to it if we needed heat or anything. It wouldn't be completely convenient, but what I really said was we would put a camping wood stove in there. The problem with that is a lot of people think that's dangerous. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? You can't put a wood stove in a camper. Well, yeah, you can. We were nomads. We saw everybody do it. There's a little camping wood stove. They're actually made for tents. So we're just going to put it in a travel trailer. And you do it properly. You know, you put the backing behind it so it doesn't catch anything on fire. But people thought that was so dangerous, their brains immediately said, no, you got to find something safer. So they want us to get a 500-gallon tank. Well, I just showed you what we have. We've got a generator, a water heater, a little camp stove, to cook on, and then we'd have a trailer. Well, when you get one of those 500-gallon tanks, you got to have your house permitted. Then they come out and do an inspection on your appliance. Well, we don't have an appliance. So in order to do this, I would immediately have to go out and buy probably what's called a blue flame heater, so I could at least hook the 500-gallon tank into it. And then as soon as they did the inspection, filled the tank, I would immediately disconnect the blue flame heater and go completely illegal. It's about the only thing I could do, because they're not going to allow me to hook it up to my generator. What am I going to do, run a hose over there? I mean, there's just, I know somebody's going to say you can do something, but I have researched this. You cannot do what people are thinking you can do. It all would be illegal. And my guess is, if the house ever caught on fire and they caught me doing it, there would be huge fines in place. I don't want to be fined even if my house catches on fire. I don't think I'll ever call the fire department. I think I'll put it out myself, but I don't want to get in that argument again. If there's a fire, what I would literally have to do is disconnect the propane from the generator, whatever I'm using on, hook it back up to the blue flame, so the fire department would come out and say, okay, yeah, he did everything correctly. But the house isn't built correctly. They're not going to do it. The propane company isn't going to hook it up to the house. It's too small, you know, there's a bunch of reasons. I didn't look them all up again, but there's just a ton of reasons. So even if I did it the way you tell me to do it and hook it up to a blue flame heater and permanently left it there, I still wouldn't be able to run it to the generator or to the camper or to the little cook stove or to the water heater. I wouldn't be able to do any of that. So what I would end up having to do is go over to the tank with one of these 20-pound tanks. And I watched a video on this. You got to get a bunch of little hookups, and you can hook it up to the 500-pound tank to the 20-pound tank. And then you put the 20-pound tank on the ground. And then you have to pour cold water on the 20-pound tank for something like 45 minutes. And so what happens is as you're cooling the tank, it draws the propane in from the 500-gallon tank into this tank. So I would have to run the generator to run the well to fill the tank. So I'm using propane to get propane. That's a huge cost. I mean, that just doesn't even make sense to me. And this is the biggest reason I don't want to do it, is I would have to have people on the property. As you know, we don't insure this place, and I have a no trespassing sign, and nobody is allowed on the property. Nobody. So if somebody trespasses on my property, meaning I didn't invite them here, and they get hurt, it is on them. It's not my responsibility. But if I invited them here, either implied or I deliberately said, come onto my property, and they get hurt, I can get sued. So like when UPS shows up, I don't allow UPS on my property. I immediately run up and I get the package from them so they don't have to come onto the property. Well, if you have a 500-pound tank sitting out in the middle of the yard, the truck driver backs up, starts to fill the tank, trips over a pothole, breaks his leg, well then I gotta pay for that injury. It means I have to have insurance, which now you just raised my price. See, when all I gotta do is once every 6 months, maybe once a year, take the tanks to the propane place, get it at a discount. I wouldn't get a discount on if they filled it. I get a discount when I take my tanks in though, when I'm grocery shopping. So if you'll click this up next box, take you to a video where I was telling you about this YouTube channel. So I hope I can inspire you to think outside the box so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.